And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a little bit how I got this laid out and how I was able to do it this way. So let's start with the attribute over here that we had, that we called chart number, page number 1. Okay, and I set it to a default of 1 because there's always going to be one page, not using 0. And let's go ahead and look at the up and down numbers here. So this is up. So let's look at our rule here. So chart number, which is our game level rule, when it's less than or equal to 3 and touch is pressed, we're going to change this to game chart plus 1. All right, so that means that, because we don't want to go any higher than 4, okay, in our number count. So that means that if it's less than or equal to 3, we can add 1 more to it. Once it gets to 4, it's not going to add a 1 to it anymore. It's going to stop. It's going to stop. It's going to stop adding. And in Game Salad, this is where you start becoming a power user. When you really understand logic and you can really start to use these operators in clever ways. When you see guys, some of the top developers on the forums, like Darren and some of these other guys, Mark the Irons, those are just people I'm thinking of on the top of my T-shirt booth. Everybody knows him. These are guys, and we're guys that know how to, really use operators and use math and really use it in creative ways, because you really understand what they do, and you start to take these operators into account and start to use them in really clever ways. Because basically Game Salad's stupid. It's a computer. It's just basically gonna put in and put out what you put into it. It's gonna do exactly what you tell it to do. Like, I see people all the time, they can't get past the GUI. They come on the forums and they're like, well, how do I change my high score? You mean how you change your high score? You take that number that you have as your score, and you tell the attribute to be changed by that number. That's how you change the score. I mean, the Game Salad doesn't necessarily do anything for you logic-wise other than write the syntax of code in the background, so you don't have to write semicolons and do line arrays and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you still have to code in Game Salad. You still have to write logic. It's very, very similar to the same kind of stuff we used to do when I was a kid. I'm 46. On my Commodore 64 and the old Radio Shack machines and stuff, we had the basic programming language was the programming language that they were teaching us young kids, and it was line step logic. If A is 64, jump to line 23, and there was a command there, and you have to tell this stuff what to do, where to go, when it happens, how it happens, and under what conditions. For everything. It's not gonna do anything for you. It'll extrapolate, vector 2 math to accelerate from one spot to another but you have to tell it what spot from and when it gets to that spot and all that kind of stuff. So some people get lost in the fact that Game Salad does do certain stuff of the vectors with you, but if you want to get into the power of this stuff, you really have to understand the operators and vector math and how all this stuff really works, or you'll be stuck making really, really simple games. So anyways, in this rule, we're telling the chart attribute that, look, if you're less than 3, if you're 3 or less than, go ahead and add 1. But as soon as you get over 4, you can't. It won't do this anymore. When it's pressed, it'll look and say, "Hey, I'm already 3. I'm not going to add 1." So that's what. And we've got the reverse over here in our down arrow. Okay, got the reverse code right here. Same thing. When you are greater than 1, don't do this anymore. You've got to be greater than 1 to do this. If you're less than 1, if you're 1 or less than 1, you know, if you're not 1, you can go ahead and add it. So we're taking away. So if you're greater than 1, if you're 2, you can subtract 1. If you're 3, you can subtract 1. If you're 4, you can subtract 1. If you're 1, you can't subtract anything. And that's what we've got. We're taking, when touch is pressed, and it's going to check, it's going to say, is game chart number greater than 1? If it is, then it's going to say, do this, which we're telling it, change attribute, game chart number to game chart number -1. Logic. Pretty simple. If this happens and we meet these conditions, do this. If we don't meet these conditions, don't do it. It's pretty simple. It's logic. All right, so now let's look at now we can start to understand the other stuff that I did here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this. This is player 1, right? Score. All these actors are the same. These are if you look over here in my my actor thing, you're going to see that I don't have all this number of actors. I've got 1 score actor for player 1, 1 score actor for player 2, 1 name actor for player 1, 1 name actor for player 2. That's it. All these are just 4 actors duplicated. Okay? And this is the power of tables. You don't have to make a bunch of different prototypes. You can just make one. And so to get you to understand what I did, let's just look. We know if we're looking this through a window and this is our table in the background, this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, row 7, row 8. Okay? So we know now if we went to page 2, let's say we took this whole thing and slid it down like a window, and you could see the numbers right through it if you were looking at this as like a chart on a graph. Okay, when you slid it up and there were holes in it and it matched, right? And you were looking at the first 8 rows, and then we just slid this down and put the top row on row 9, we would see rows 9 through 16. So now in essence, in that theory, this becomes row 9, row 10, row 11, row 12, row 13, row 14, row 15, row 16, etc., etc., every time you slide it down. So now what I've done is I'm cataloging my page. I showed you the attribute, right? So we know when we're on page 1, when we're calling for page 2, when we're calling page 3, and we're calling for page 4. So now if we were to write this out, we know that row 1 on page 1, this top box here, right? We know that on page 1, it's row 1. On page 2, it's row 9. Right? On page 3, it's row 17. And on the last page, it's, I can't remember. Let me look, and I'll tell you. It's row 22. So see what I've done here? It's row 1, row 8, row 15, row 22, which is, like I said, sliding it down in order. All right, it's gonna bump up to the next row. All right, it's gonna look at everything, and then, so basically what I did was I built a prototype actor, and I made 4 attributes so I could tell each one when I go in there and edit them. Now I'm going to edit them in scene. I can't do it in here because then they'd all be the same. So I have for each chart, okay, right in here, each page, okay, I'm saying if attribute, our main attribute, game chart number, which we're changing with the up and down buttons, right? We saw how that works. If it equals 1, you're going to look to the table and you're going to look to your self number, okay? Self, and then this number, you're going to look to the number in row 3. If it's 2, you're going to look to the second. See it right here, how I've got it? Okay, when chart equals 2, now you're going to look to this second number to find out which row you are. And you're always going to be in the same column. And it's the same thing down here. All right, when we're on page 3, you're going to look to this third number for which row you are. And the same way with the fourth, you're going to look to it to see which number you are. Now that we've written the code this way, we can make any rows we want based on how we manipulate these numbers. And we don't have to go in and do a whole bunch of editing and all these different rules for everything. All we have to do is come over here and go open this box and go, okay, for chart 1, you're row 1. In chart 2, you're row 8. In chart 3, you're row 15. And then in chart 4, you're row 22. And then we can look at the second one and we can say, all right, in chart 1, you're row 2. In chart 2, you're row 9. In chart 3, you're row 16. And on chart 4, you're row 23. And the actor is the exact same stuff, okay, except that you're a different column number. You're column 1. And we know what column 1 is the score for the first actor. So then we go over here, and it's the same thing in this one, except it's going to be a different series of rows. It's going to be a different column, same rows, except it's going to be, let's look at it in here, except it's going to be column 4. Okay, column 4, and look to for your row number. And you know, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you just map it out. I mean, I write a lot of this code. I do logic for work, so I mean, I write a lot of this code. I know GameSolid so well in my head. I'll do 10 iterations of code in my head, and because I kind of know how it's going to work, how they talk to each other. I can keep track of all this stuff in my head, and then I'll write it down. I'll commit it to a piece of paper. I'll write down and, you know, who, what, where, when, and how. You know, I want a rule, and it's going to say this, and it's going to change this attribute, and I can look at my code, and I can start to see when I've written it down how it interacts, and I can start to see the problems. And I'll write 10 generations of code that work because I find ways to refine it. Oh, I can do that better. I can get rid of 3 steps if I just do this to this. And by writing your code down and kind of seeing it all in one place instead of scattered in like 10 different actors, you can see how your code connects, and you can start to see, well, maybe if I did it this way and I use this technique. And this is why it's so important to go in and watch a lot of the videos, even, you know, stuff that's not related. You should just have days where you sit down and you might watch, you know, 5 or 6 different videos on, you know, on the cookbook or on T-Shirt's website or on Darren's website, or go to the GS Guide, my unofficial GS Guide, and there's tons of videos on there, and just watch videos. Because you learn little tricks. You learn stuff that later on you might be doing something and you go, well, I remember this method. What if I, you know, did this method instead of doing that? And then you learn to combine all these things. Don't be in so much of a rush to, you know, just get in there and crank out a piece of crap. It's tough competing out there in the games, and we see people all the time, man, in this stuff on GameSolid. They come and they go, and it's because they don't really take the time to really learn the engine. They don't really take the time to learn how to do things powerful. They rush stuff. They're going to be the next Angry Birds, and then they make a piece of crap and nobody wants it, and then they just go away because they get discouraged. And you know, watch the videos. I got a notebook from when I first started GameSolid, and I would sit down and I just watched all the videos. First, I started watching on stuff that would be about stuff that I wanted to do, and I would take notes. And this is how you do this, and I would write all the code out in a little notebook, and then I could just go back and look, and I could follow along, and I had a little log of how you did different coding, and I never even went to the forums for like the first 8 months when I was learning GameSolid, and I was spending 2 hours a day after work learning it and watching videos and practicing and doing stuff. And I designed my first apps with the Gleason Group. That we have a franchise of children's books that sold millions of dollars in copies. you know, it was like I never hit the forums until after I published like 3 apps. And then finally I decided to start going on the forums. And people were like, where'd this guy come from? And it's like, you know, you're not helping yourself by running to the forums every 5 minutes. You want to be good at this. Man, it's work. It's work, because I can tell you what, you know, everybody, all the other developers that are out there that you're competing against, they're working their ass off. And man, if you don't work your ass off, it's like, you know, being a star basketball player or whatever. You know, like Larry Bird and Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and all these guys, you know, Kevin Garnett, you know, these guys work their ass off. Even though they're great, they're still in the gym working their ass off, taking shots 2 hours before games for an hour and running and lifting weights and doing all this stuff every day, because the guys that they're competing against are doing the same stuff. And it's like, if you're not doing that little extra more, you're not going to compete. Everybody else isn't sitting around, lying around, you know, just hoping to throw something together. These people are dedicated, working 10, 12 hours a day to make great games. They're living this stuff. And man, if you're not living it, and you don't and you never mind just having talent. You got to have talent to start with. But if you're not living this stuff and working it, you're not going to compete. Plain and simple. Everybody else is going to blow your doors off simply because they're working harder than you. And you can't replace hard work. You just can't. You can't replace talent. You can't control talent, but what you can control is hard work, dedication, and putting yourself into stuff. And man, if you can do that, you're going to get somewhere. If you can't, trust me, you're not getting anywhere. You can think you are and you can say you are, but in the end, you won't. That's just the way it goes. We've seen all kinds of guys come and go. And, you know, this is how I think, you know, templates should be done. You know, do a little video, give you the code, you know, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, you know, he eats forever. So that's kind of my philosophy. And so I hope this helps you. I'm going to post the link on the forums to this template. I don't mind giving this out. It's not really any secret code. You really got to get into it to understand it anyways. You're not going to be able to just use this in anything. So anyways, man, keep working. If you're working hard out there, keep working hard. Keep trying at it. Keep developing your skills. And you could get somewhere. Then nothing's ever guaranteed, man. But one thing is guaranteed. If you're not working hard and you're not working your skills and you're not continually getting better in game salad and you're not learning, you're not going anywhere. So the choice is up to you, you know. All right, man. Peace out. Frying Bacon Studios.